What's going on, family? I'm just here to remind you that you can get yourself a copy of my new book, On the Shoulders of Giants, Volume 4 of the Caribbean, by visiting my website, www.ontheshoulders1.com, and help support me as I continue on my mission to make sure that my people have our information, even though, there are many people trying to stop us from learning our history. But hey, we can teach ourselves, and one of the tools we can use is my new book, On the Shoulders of Giants, Volume 4, The Caribbean. Remember, visit my website, www.ontheshoulders1.com, to get your copy, and I appreciate your support. The first African-American military pilot, Mr. Eugene Bullard. On October 9th, 1895, Eugene Jacques Bullard was born in Columbus, Georgia, as the seventh of 10 children to his parents. William Bullard was the name of his father, who was also called Octave, a black man born in Stewart County, Georgia. Josephine Thomas, who was also called Joya Key, was Eugene Bullard's mother. Joya Key was of black and Muskogee Creek indigenous American origins. She died when Eugene was 6 years old. Eugene would attend the 28th Street School in Columbus, Georgia until the 5th grade. During these years, Eugene witnessed acts of racial terrorism against blacks. A mob of angry white men attempted to lynch Octave Bullard over a work dispute. The racism in Columbus, Georgia was becoming too much for Eugene to deal with, and he wanted to escape it. His father would often tell him stories about France abolishing slavery and black men being treated as human beings and not as animals. These stories resonated with the young Eugene and sparked a flame that would lead him to France. At the age of 11, Eugene decided to run away from home in hopes of eventually making it to France. He traveled to Atlanta, Georgia, where he became acquainted with the Stanleys, a group of British gypsies who allowed him to work as a caretaker to their horses. They also taught him how to ride and race horses. The Stanleys told him stories about black people in Britain being free of the racial discrimination blacks faced in America. That added to Eugene's desire to reach Europe. Around 1911, Eugene was in Dawson, Georgia, working as a stable boy and aspiring jockey for the Turner family. Because of his hard work and dedication, the Turner family allowed Eugene to be their jockey at the 1911 County Fair in Dawson, Georgia. The following year, Eugene made his way to Norfolk, Virginia, where he snuck onto a German merchant freight ship. He was eventually discovered and kicked off the ship in Aberdeen, Scotland. During his stay in Aberdeen, he found odd jobs to survive. He then traveled to Glasgow, Scotland, where he worked more odd jobs. He then arrived in London and eventually Liverpool, where he became a prize fighter and comedian with the Freedman Pickaninnies. Eugene's boxing trainer was Aaron Lister Brown, or better known as the well-known boxer, the Dixie Kid. The Dixie Kid arranged for Eugene to fight in Paris, France, which was a dream to come true for Eugene because he would finally make it to France. After the fight, Eugene decided to live in France for a while and continue boxing. He also found work in a music hall. Germany declared war on France on August 3, 1914. World War I had begun on July 28 of 1914. In October of 1914, Eugene Bullard enlisted into the French Army's Foreign Legion. Eugene was involved in active combat against the Germans, first as a machine gunner, then involved in the Second Battle of Champagne. He served with the 3rd Marching Regiment of the 1st Foreign Regiment, the 2nd Marching Regiment of the 1st Foreign Regiment, the 170th French Infantry Regiment, and the 2nd Marching Regiment of the 2nd Foreign Regiment in the 1st Moroccan Division. The French Army's 1st Moroccan Division was one of the Army's most highly decorated divisions. While the casualties the Foreign Legion suffered caused them to be reassigned as a reinforcement unit. In addition to Eugene participating in the Second Battle of Champagne, he participated in the battles of Somme and Verdun. He was severely injured in the Battle of Verdun. While recovering from his injuries, Eugene decided to join the 170th French Infantry Regiment, who were nicknamed the Swallows of Death. Even injuries didn't keep Eugene from being awarded for his valor and service. While recovering from his injuries, a white soldier named Jeff Dixon bet Eugene $2,000 that he would not become a military pilot. His injuries prevented him from serving in the infantry, so his next choice was volunteering for the French Air Service in 1916. He started as a gunner before receiving flight training, then receiving his pilot license in 1917. In November of 1916, Eugene joined the Lafayette Flying Corps. They would accompany French pilots on missions to bomb their enemies and perform reconnaissance. Eugene received a promotion to corporal in June of 1917. He was involved in 20 combat missions as a member of Squadron N-85. He is credited with shooting down German planes, but the number of planes shot down are disputed. After World War I, Eugene worked as a jazz drummer in French nightclubs. He eventually opened a nightclub and athletic club. Legendary performers such as Louis Armstrong and Josephine Baker would often perform at his clubs. Eugene would marry a woman named Marcelle Strawman in 1923. They were married for 12 years before Marcelle left her husband and 2 daughters. As World War II began, the French needed Eugene's help and skills to spy on the Germans who would frequent his nightclubs. He served in France's 51st Infantry Regiment during the German invasion of 1940. Eugene was wounded during the invasion but managed to escape to Spain and eventually made his way to the United States. He would be admitted to a hospital in New York to seek treatment for his injuries. Now further injured from World War II, Eugene was living in New York seeking to make a living as he did in France, but found that the US was still racist. He found odd jobs to support himself and often worked as an interpreter for Louis Armstrong in Europe. The nightclubs he owned in France were destroyed during the war, but the French government gave him a settlement check. He used the money to purchase an apartment in New York. Bullard was severely beaten by police officers during a Paul Robeson concert. The incident was captured on film, but nothing was done to the police officers. Bullard worked as an elevator operator in New York before he died in 1961 of stomach cancer. During his life, Eugene Bullard was awarded 14 medals by the French government. He was knighted by the French General Charles de Gaulle in 1959. He was inducted into the Georgia Aviation Hall of Fame in 1989, posthumously appointed to second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force, and a statue of him was placed into the Museum of Aviation in Warner Robins, Georgia in 2019. He became the first African American to become a military pilot, but he had to join the French Army to do so because of American racism. To Mr. Eugene Bullard, we proudly stand on your shoulders. For more information, make sure you visit my website at www.ontheshoulders1.com. There, you can purchase a copy of my new book, On the Shoulders of Giants, Volume 4, The Caribbean. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/OTSOG for as little as $1 a month. You can also support me by hitting the super like button under this video. I love you all. Make sure y'all catch this next video coming up.